Okay, we are live on the air. Thank you guys very much. Welcome to the very first ThunderQuack podcast network roundtable discussion. We're going to do these once a month for you, the last Friday of every month, and this one is all about Marvel superheroes. Joining me this month, right now, we've got Kyle. Say hi, Kyle.
Hello, everybody. How's it going?
That is Kyle of Star Wars: The Saga Continues, and he's also he writes our recaps over on the front lines. Well, you did
Rebels
for front
podcast.
lines and
Yeah.
now Rebels podcast. We've got Curtis and we've got Tim coming in, but they are having some slight technical difficulties at the moment. They should be here any minute, but let's say. Oh, and I have it open in my own window, which I always do, and I'm hearing my own voice. It's always a rocky start with these things. I got to remember that. If I sit just right, my Oswald ears line up. Did you notice that? I did that on
Nice.
purpose. You can see I've got Boba Fett, I've got Bugs Bunny in the picture there. That's my Wampa from Star Wars Celebration 6.
Nice.
Oswald ears, as I said, Tetris on the wall there. I but I let's oh man, what do you where how do you want to start this? These guys are going to be a little bit. It looks like. I how do you want to start? Let's introduce the idea, I guess, that
Yeah,
we're going to
sure.
talk about our sort of it's a best case worst case scenario situation regarding Marvel Cinematic Universe. Which ones are you looking forward to? And which ones are you the most worried about? So we're going to kind of do our each of our most anticipated, least anticipated. But
Yeah.
you know what?
Despite my shirt from the other side of the
Yeah,
pond.
yeah.
Of pond.
I dress properly. I'm wearing my amazing Spider-Man. It's the camera there. You can see there's a little spider hanging from the camera lens right there. But when it just looks like I have my Spider-Man costume on underneath. Let's start by maybe talking a little bit about ThunderQuack while we wait for these guys to jump in here. And thank you very much to the 9 viewers currently watching live. We
Yeah, there we
appreciate
go.
every last one of you. Um, but let's talk a little bit about ThunderQuack. So ThunderQuack Podcast Network is a network of podcasters. And we're all sort of devoted to the idea of bringing the listening audience the best in I guess entertainment, news, and commentary. Right, that's what most of the podcasts are about. We've got sort of our headliners would be Quiver the Green Arrow podcast, the Rebels podcast, Star Wars: The Saga Continues, and then you've got so those are each kind of about very specific properties, and then you've got the more general stuff, which is the Pullbox podcast, which is all about comic books, and you've got upcoming podcasts like 8 Bits of Destiny and Irregularly Scheduled, which are both sort of like general topic. One being specifically about video games, but kind of video game culture, and that one's coming up sooner rather than later. And then Irregularly Scheduled is going to be very different from anything else that we do because it's actually going to have seasons. It's going to be a produced sort of show. It's not going to be a weekly thing, and hence it being called Irregularly Scheduled. So come out, they'll come out one week at a time, sort of all in a row, but they'll be chunked up into like these seasons. So, but we will also have some cool one-off episodes. Like our premiere episode will be an episode about the Legend of Korra. with Amanda Conkin from Quiver the Green Arrow podcast, my co-host over there, and my wife also talking about Korra and sort of gender representation and that sort of thing in popular culture. So it'll be irregularly scheduled is cool because it's going to be a little bit more about sort of like I don't know, investigative topics. We're kind of looking at the different aspects of nerd culture, of geek culture, and trying to come at it from that angle. But
might I propose a Black Stormtrooper episode?
Yeah, that is definitely something to talk about. We will be doing Star Wars is our first season, so because it is my podcast, so of course Star Wars is the first season. But these are some of the things that you can look forward to on a regularly scheduled. As I said, the core episode. I don't know what Steve wants to talk about yet, but Steve Glosson of Geek Out Loud is generally, I like him to be my second episode co-host. So I'll do another one-off episode with him as the second episode, and that topic will be completely his choice. And then our first official season, like I said, is going to be Star Wars. And the way that's going to work is we're gonna delve deep into what makes a Star Wars fan. Like, what is a Star Wars fan? What does that mean? Because I think people have an idea of what it means, but we're going to look at it, and I'm going to interview different people with varying degrees of Star Wars fandom. And by the end of it, hopefully we come out of it with an understanding of what it means to be a Star Wars fan, or maybe like categorizations of Star Wars fans or something like that. Because I think, Kyle, you can agree with this, that we are Star Wars fans, quite hardcore, with our Boba Fett helmets and our Wampa puppets.
And my Star Wars poster for my fan film back there.
Exactly. But then there are people who just like the movies, and there's nothing wrong with that, but where's the echelon, right? Like, and it's not about an elitism thing, it's about categorization, classification, and just really having a discussion about Star Wars. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day. And really, here's the key question that we're going to investigate with that. If you don't like the prequels, or the prequel era more accurately, are you still a Star Wars fan? Because at this point today, that means that you don't like the majority of Star Wars. Since they wiped out the expanded universe, and we've got 3 classic movies that everybody loves, and then 3 prequels, and a 5.5 season television series. If you don't like the prequel era, I don't know if you like Star Wars that much, because really that's the overwhelming majority of it at this point. But that's not what we're talking today. But that is something to look forward to, and you know what? That'll probably come sometime soon after Star Wars Celebration, because that's going to be the best place to grab the hardcore of the hardcore Star Wars fans and grab them and talk to them and see what they have to say.
Oh, absolutely.
But one of the other seasons that we're going to do is going to talk about dinosaurs, which is a big favorite of mine. And we're going to talk about dinosaurs and again, this is sort of like a perception thing. A lot of it's going to be sort of people's perceptions of things, and it's going to be sort of discussing dinosaurs and how they've evolved, pun intended, I suppose, in the scientific eye, but how they still in popular culture remain the same. And you know, like what's the most important part of that? Our nostalgia or scientific accuracy? And you know, can we do a little bit of both? So and obviously with Jurassic World coming out, it'll be very topical. It'll be a concept that I think a lot of us are going to have to come to grips with and talk about and discuss and break down. So I'm hoping for that one I can get some actual experts, maybe some paleontologists and some science folk onto the podcast and talk to them and get their expert opinions, but also talking to regular people, talking to avid dinosaur lovers like myself and discovering what sort of makes that work, what makes them love dinosaurs, and whether or not feathery, furry, fluffy dinosaurs are just as awesome as the scaly, lumbering dinosaurs from when we were kids. But let me see. I'm just gonna see if we can get some of these guys in here. They're not. Nobody's popping in yet. Let's do this. I got a vamp, and I learned from the best. And what would Steve do in this situation? Steve Glosson would go to the listeners. So tweet us at ThunderQuack. It's ThunderQuack Network. ThunderQuack. I don't even know what the Twitter is for ThunderQuack.
I think isn't it ThunderQuack Net?
I think it's You're right. It's ThunderQuack Net. So tweet us at ThunderQuack Net with a question. Just give us a question, and Kyle and I we will just spitball for a few minutes.
Yeah. Here we go. I like that idea.
Yeah. So just somebody hurry, shoot something at us. We're on a bit of a delay, right? Like they're not seeing it until a couple of minutes later, till like a minute later. So
okay.
They'll come in, but I know Andy is watching, and I know Andy can send us a question. So hurry up, Andy. We're waiting. Time's ticking away. And while we wait for that, Kyle, why don't you tell people about Star Wars: The Saga Continues and what you guys do over there? Because maybe not everybody's watching this is super familiar with Star Wars: The Saga Continues.
All right. Yeah. Well, basically, I mean, we started the podcast to cover all things Star Wars Episode 7. I had listened to Mike and Matt on the Frontlines, the Clone Wars podcast for several years, and then after the first couple seasons of just being a listener and being involved on the forums and stuff, then I got involved with like writing the recaps and stuff like that. And so then when the announcement came out that Lucasfilm had been bought by Disney, that they're making more Star Wars movies, I think that same day, I messaged Mike about it, and I said, hey, I want to start a podcast about this, thinking at the time that I was going to be cool and be like, I kind of wanted my claim to fame to be like, I'm going to be the first one to start a podcast dedicated just to Episode 7. And even though that might be kind of our mantra, I guess, is like we talk about the same kind of stuff that every other major Star Wars podcast out there is talking about. So I think we've kind of found our niche. Me and Tim, my co-host, who also works with you guys on Frontlines and the Rebels podcast and all that kind of stuff. We kind of have. We still report on all the news and the rumors and all that kind of stuff, but try to have some fun with it. We pretty much every episode go off on some wild tangent speculating about some character that we'd like to see in one of these movies, or a possible idea for a spin-off movie. And so it's less just sort of strict news reporting, and we just try to have fun with it, and have our crazy fan theories, and we're always geeking out about Star Wars Battlefront and how much we're looking forward to that new game. And of course, we don't focus just on Episode 7. We talk about Rebels and, like I said, Battlefront and the video games and stuff, and the spin-off films and everything. But kind of our main focus is sort of all the new projects coming up in Star Wars. So everything that has kind of sprung up since the Disney stuff, and not necessarily talking about Rebels and stuff that's ongoing right now, but just kind of the news and the upcoming future and all that kind of stuff. So we have a lot of fun with that, and I enjoy some of the feedback we get from our listeners, where people say, this might not be like the biggest Star Wars podcast out there, or the one with the best production values or the most guests or all that kind of stuff, but these guys are just fun to listen to, and you can tell they're really enthusiastic about Star Wars, and I read stuff like that, I'm like, that's what we're going for. So yeah, we're just there to talk about new Star Wars stuff and have a good time and have some fun with it.
Cool. We've got a couple of tweets here, so let's start with this. Andy sends us a tweet. I lost it now. Oh, you guys are sending them Fast and Furious. That's awesome. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about Fast and Furious. But Andy says, would you be fine with having one Spider-Man in the films and one on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.? I'll go first. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You know what? I'm actually reading Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane currently for Pullbox Podcast, which you can find at pullboxpodcast.com or by going to thunderquack.com and following the links there. And Curtis and I, that's one of the books that we're reading for this month. Pullbox, for those who don't know, is a graphic novel book club. And what that means is I pick a comic, a graphic novel, or trade paperback. Curtis picks one, and then the listeners pick one, and we go away, we read those, and then we come back, and once a month we sort of recap everything and then give our thoughts on that. And so Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane, which is a series from the mid to late 2000s, that revolves around Mary Jane Watson, actually, is one of the books that's the book that I picked. So that story, rereading it right now, it is so good. It is so good. I'm like addicted to it. It was the job was to go back and read one volume, and I'm rereading the whole series before tomorrow morning, which is when Curtis and I will record. And I'm almost done. And what I would love to see is a TV version of Peter Parker or of Spider-Man along those lines. The fact that Spider-Man's coming to the movies means that we won't get that, because in the movies he will almost 100% be Peter Parker. I think that's pretty solid. Whether or not Peter Parker is a specific ethnicity, I'm not gonna rule anything out at this point. I don't think that they'll use Miles Morales in order to introduce that character in the Avengers movies. And I don't think that they will, not on a relaunch. I think the smartest thing to do is to bring Peter Parker in with these new Avengers movies, with Civil War, Captain America: Civil War, and then in that first standalone Spidey movie, maybe to bring in Miles Morales as a character. He might not necessarily get the powers right away, but bring him in, introduce him as a character, as sort of this younger kid that you can, and it's not going to be the same as the Ultimate story, and everybody needs to kind of get over that idea. And I don't know, I should hope that by now everybody recognizes that these characters aren't going to be exactly the same as they are in the comics. Iron Man is so different in terms of his story than he was in the comics. The character is intact, and that's what Marvel does so well. So if they start futzing with the story, that's fine. That's cool. We know Civil War is not going to be exactly the same. We know it's going to have some differences. So with that in mind, I think what could be really cool is if you bring in Peter Parker, and he's the Spider-Man that's on the Avengers, and you introduce some of the other characters in that universe, and then in that standalone movie you bring in Miles Morales, and then maybe by the end of that movie, or you've introduced him there, kind of like what they did with Arrow and the Flash, you introduce the character without powers, and then he gets his own TV series. Or even like a Netflix series, or something short like Agent Carter, and in that Miles Morales gets his powers and becomes another Spider-Man. Because it seems to me right now in the comic books, what they're doing, for those who don't know, there's a big event this summer called Secret Wars, and they're restructuring the Marvel Universe to become this thing called Battle World, where they take all the alternate universes. So you've got Age of Apocalypse, and you've got the 2099 universe, and you've got House of M, and all these different things that they've done over the years. X-Men 92 is one of them, which I'm super excited about, which is the old X-Men from 1992 from the big relaunch when Jim Lee redesigned all their costumes. They're the X-Men that I grew up with, the ones from the animated series. They're taking all of these different things, and they're bringing all these worlds together into one planet called Battle World, which some people might remember from Secret War. And so there's going to be all of these fights between these different versions of different characters. And what that's going to do, most importantly, is it's going to bring 616, which is the standard universe, the comic book universe, and the Ultimate universe, and it's going to just put them together. And by the end of all of that, when Battle World's all said and done and we have an Earth that resembles Earth again, because that will happen, don't worry. Everybody's all freaking out that this is going to be status quo forever. When that's all said and done, I guarantee you the Ultimate Universe won't exist anymore, and the Ultimate Universe and the regular 616 will just be one thing. They'll just be one universe, and Miles Morales and Peter Parker will live alongside each other. And maybe Miles will get a new name. Maybe Peter will get a new name as their alter egos. The hope that I have. The hope beyond hopes, and we're getting kind of way off topic on the question, but the hope beyond hope that I have is that we'll have Miles Morales, Peter Parker, and Gwen Stacy from the Spider-Gwen universe, which is Spider-Woman. She's Spider-Woman in her own universe where she got bit by the spider instead of Peter Parker, and she has the powers, and she's in a band with Mary Jane, and all of this really cool stuff that came out of Spider-Verse. And my hope is that those three characters can come together on one team, and that's just one book. That's one comic called Spiders, and it's just three spider characters together, and they don't need to be on the Avengers, and they don't need to be a part of any of the other teams because they're awesome in their own right. So that's my hope for what happens with Spider-Man, both in the comics and kind of in the movies / TV. I think there's room for both things to happen. I think there's room for Peter Parker and Miles Morales to exist alongside one another, and I hope that that's what we get to see. Kyle, what do you think?
Well, what was the original question?
Let me go back to it. Would you be fine with having one Spider-Man in the films and one on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
I think I would. I don't know. I can't, honestly can't go nearly in as much depth with this stuff as you can because A, I don't read the comic books all that much, and B, I've watched all the movies and stuff, but I'm a little behind on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So
I'm super behind on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah, no, I mean, I plan to get caught up on that at some point, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, I do like the idea of like the movies and the TV universes kind of gelling together, and I think. I mean, I would think that with Marvel and the way they've done things with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. so far, at least in terms of the way I know it, well, I guess when you say two different versions of Spider-Man, I like what you were talking about, where if they introduce like Miles Morales or something like that in one of the movies, and then have him become a character either in his own show or a Netflix series, or have him be on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I think that could work out pretty well. But I guess when I first heard the question, and he said two different versions of Spider-Man, I immediately thought of like the way that DC is having two different versions of the Flash, because they've got the Flash TV series going right now, and then they cast somebody else to play him in the movies, and so there's going to be like two different versions going on at once. And on the one hand, I mean, I don't know if I can say I don't like that, but I think I would like the idea better of them sort of lining up. But then at the same time, it's like, well, they don't have to, because there's already kind of been a precedent set where not every superhero movie and comic book show and stuff like that is going to follow along those guidelines. And so, I don't know. I guess as long as they're doing the character justice in both of those mediums, as long as they're telling good stories and keeping it entertaining and everything, it's like, yeah, it could go either way.
That's what it comes down to, right? It's just got to be good stories. That's the most important part of it. Cool. Let's jump into another question. I really like this one. It'd be a little bit more of a short question. 94 Beyond D Stokely on Twitter asks us, do you think we'll see Amora the Enchantress in Marvel's Phase 3 as the first female major antagonist? I'll say this. I have no idea if we'll see the Enchantress specifically. I think the Enchantress is a great villain to bring in. I don't know what their plans are going to be for the next phase, for Phase 3, as sort of like an overall thing. I mean, other than we know Thanos is coming in as sort of the big thing, because that's sort of how it caps off is with Infinity War. But we do have a Thor movie, and the movie is called Thor Ragnarok. I don't know enough about Thor to know who the bad guy will be, or if that's connected to an existing story. But I think the more important part of this question is having a major female antagonist. That's a cool idea, and it's something that I would like to see. I want to see more female characters in pop culture, just across the board. I think that there's one property right now that is doing a good job of having a fairly diverse and interesting cast, and that's Arrow. I think Flash is doing a good job as well, but I think because Arrow now has 2.5 seasons, they've had more opportunity to bring in all sorts of characters, and they haven't shied away from anything. They like we were just saying about Spider-Man, it's about telling good stories, and that's sort of what they look at first and foremost. But they do intentionally pepper in these elements of diversity, and I think that that's really important. I think it's the one place I would say in the movies that Marvel is actually lacking right now. We know Captain Marvel is on the slate, so that's good things coming. That's obviously a step in the right direction, but like I think this is an instance of more is more, right? Not less is more. We need to level that playing field, both with gender representation across the board. I'm not just saying male female either. And sort of obviously just representation in general. So that includes race, that includes ideology. So whether that's religion or all sorts of different things. And orientation, just all of these things need to be sort of accounted for across the board in this stuff. And I don't think that they're doing a disservice at this point, but I think that they're teetering right on the edge. But they've got that whole slate all the way into 2019, and it's not super diverse. I mean, especially now that Spider-Man comes in and bumps the Black Panther a little bit. Like it's a little disconcerting. So that's why I hope their casting choice for Peter Parker can be a little bit outside the box, and that they can bring Miles Morales into the universe. But we're still talking about guys there. So let's get some more properties going with female characters, right? And not just heroes. And I think that that's the cool part of that tweet is let's think about bringing in ladies on both ends of the good and evil spectrum, and everywhere in between, because it's just good storytelling, right? That's what the world looks like. It's not a bunch of guys calling. I mean, that's debatable. It is a bunch of guys currently calling the shots. It shouldn't be. It should be an equal representation, and it should be the best people calling the shots, not determined by anything else. So just your ability to do the job. And so in the same way, it should be the characters who have the best ability to tell a story, right? And that's not always guys. That's not always male characters, right? So let's add some females into the mix, both good and bad, and everything in between, and that'll make the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe better, right? Do you have a counterpoint to that, Kyle?
I guess no. I mean, for the most part, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think we could definitely use more diverse characters and all that kind of stuff. I think the two counterpoints are, one, I mean, that can kind of sometimes be hard when you're dealing with the source material that they're working with, when there's already so many established male characters and stuff. I mean, you've got Joss Whedon directing the Avengers, who has shown in the past that he knows how to work with diverse casts and has a lot of powerful female characters and all that kind of thing. And I think he did a pretty good job in the Avengers with integrating like Black Widow and even what's her name, the Shield agent, Maria Hill or whatever her name is. It's like he's trying to include them in there, but at the same time, like in the first Avengers movie, you can't just like start pulling out lesser-known female superheroes when Thor and Iron Man and Captain America are like the big guns. But no, I definitely agree with you that you know, the more the better as far as how much stuff they can work in there eventually. And we have Tim in now.
Yeah, Tim's here.
There we go.
I made it finally.
Awesome. Were you done with your thought, Kyle?
Well, one other thing I was going to point out. I had one other thought, but I'll kind of cut that short. But I don't know much about the Enchantress, being the novice comic fan that I am. I'm more just into, you know, the movies and the TV shows and stuff like that. But I do definitely want to see more of Nebula in the second Guardians of the Galaxy movie.
Yes.
I thought that character was kind of, you know, she had an interesting premise in the first one, and they didn't do much with it, and I don't think it was like a bad character, or that she was written badly or anything. It's just, you know, they spent so much time focusing on building up the team and everything, the villains didn't get a whole lot of development. So I'm glad she's coming back for the second one. I have a huge crush on Karen Gillan from Doctor Who, so can't wait to see what she does with that role. So.
Cool. Well, welcome to the hangout, to the roundtable, Tim. With your arrival, we can get things started proper. Kurtis isn't going to be able to make it in. He's having technical difficulties. We'll sort it all out for next time. Make sure that everybody is able to get into the hangout. But Tim, also from Star Wars: The Saga Continues. So we've got one host from Frontline / The Rebels podcast, and 2 hosts from The Saga Continues. So this is almost, we could just switch the topic into a Star Wars roundtable, but we won't. We're not.
Yeah, because I'm actually looking forward to talking about Marvel for a change on
that's
podcast. Yeah.
That is my favorite thing about what our awesome Patreon contributors have allowed us to do by supporting us on Patreon, is that now we have a new platform for jumping in and talking about whatever we want. So once a month, whoever wants to jump in and have these conversations can do so, and we can talk about whatever we want. We can talk about Marvel. We can talk about Star Wars. We can talk about foot fungus. I don't know. We can talk about whatever we want. It doesn't matter. Cool. Well, let's jump right into our actual main topic here for tonight. We got 15 minutes left. Just kidding. We'll go a little long. I don't have anything else to do tonight. I don't know about you guys, if you guys have hard outs. I doubt it. Right?
I'm just going to go play Star Wars: The Old Republic after this. I got Sith to kill, but they can wait.
Now you're good to go, Tim?
Yeah, I'm all set.
So we'll go a little long because we started about 15 minutes late. So we'll and Kyle and I've been vamping. We've been vamping our butts off for the last little while. So,
you've been doing most of it, but
most of it. That's true.
I'm here for moral support.
It does not take much to get me talking about this stuff. So I have lots to say. With that, I am actually gonna end up handing this over to you guys. I will go last. So here's the rules. You gotta pick from the upcoming slate of movies that we know are coming. I really should have brought this up beforehand, but maybe one of you guys can bring it up while I explain the rules. So the upcoming slate of Marvel movies, which we'll have in a second here, you pick the movie that you are the most excited about, hands down, and the movie that you are the most worried about. Okay, so that's the one that's got like sort of the most pitfalls, or not necessarily the one that you think that you'll like the least, but the one that sort of looks like it could be trouble, and then we'll talk about why that is. So do either of you guys have that slate up yet? I
just put the link in the little group chat here.
Oh, okay, cool.
Because I had already pulled up the image. It doesn't have Spider-Man in it, but we all know where that one goes.
Okay, so here's the slate. We've got, for 2016, we've got Captain America Civil War. We have Doctor Strange. And then we've got Guardians of the Galaxy 2. And then next after that, which isn't in this image but is on the slate now, is Spider-Man, which bumps everything else forward. It shuffled some things around, actually, so this isn't exactly in order. But after Spider-Man, we've got Thor, then Black Panther, then Captain Marvel, then the Inhumans, and Avengers: Infinity War Part 1 and Part 2, which are two different movies. So, Tim, since you just got here, let's start with you. What is the movie out of that slate that you are the most excited about?
Well, right now I'm probably might say the obvious, but it's going to be Captain America: Civil War.
Okay.
And I mean, it's not official yet as far as what movie Spider-Man is going to debut in, but it's looking more likely that it's going to be Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
And I was already excited for that movie just for the fact that it's going to be based on Civil War, and you got Captain America, you got Iron Man, and Black Panther is going to be in there. But to add Spider-Man into the mix, man, it just shot my expectation and excitement for that level through the roof. I mean, even if it's like not even a big role that he has in there, just his presence in the movie and just in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is that alone, seeing him for the first time, and they're just going to be amazing. So, but yeah, right now that's definitely my most excited out of this new slate. But there's other ones too, but this one is, since it's kind of the one that's closest. I mean, we still got Avengers: Age of Ultron and Ant-Man, but this one, after, like, for Phase 3 anyway, this is going to be the first one. So there's a lot to be excited about in this slate, but it's hard to top getting a movie with Captain America, Iron Man, and possibly Spider-Man. So yeah, and just to wonder too where Spider-Man's going to fit in that. Is he going to, I mean, because it's based on the comics, he starts off on the side of Iron Man, and then he ends up joining with Cap's side. So are they going to follow that, or are we going to see Spider-Man's journey through that, or is he just going to play a small part? He's going to stay on one side, and that's it. So just the anticipation, wondering exactly how he's going to fit in there, just has me excited. Man, I just can't wait.
Cool. So that's your most excited one, your most anticipated. What is your the one that you're the most worried about? This will probably invoke a little bit more discussion, because I think we can agree with everything that you just said. That Civil War is going to be good for those reasons, and that's what we're all kind of looking forward to. But which movie are you worried about?
Yeah, it's kind of hard, because really when it comes to Marvel, you don't really have to worry too much. But because looking at all these, I would say the one I'm least excited for would probably be Thor Ragnarok. But I will say, as far as worried, and this may sound a little weird, see if I can explain myself a little bit, but maybe a little bit for Guardians 2. And this is because, I mean, we haven't seen Avengers: Age of Ultron yet, but I'm just basing it off going from Iron Man 2, where that's the only past reference we have where the same director who directed the first movie went on to do the sequel. And we know that Iron Man 2 really didn't live up to what the first one set out to do. And there's just something to me, because James Gunn did an amazing job with Guardians of the Galaxy. It's probably my second favorite Marvel movie after the Avengers. And I'm glad he is back for this. But it just makes me wonder, maybe just curiosity really, is like, how is it all going to play out? Because I'm confident he'll do a good story, a great job and everything. But there's just that possibility in there. What if maybe it's more Iron Man 2 instead of Captain America: The Winter Soldier, a sequel that improves on the original? But like I said, this is the first one since that, and the Avengers, where the same director's taking over. So I just wonder if maybe, is he going to get like too much free reign, where it's going to be so out there and a little crazy? I mean, he even said where Marvel, the story idea he pitched, they go, wow, this is like kind of like, I forget the word they use, if it was risky, I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to do it anyway. So, I mean, just the thought, that idea is planted in my head a little bit. Like, is it going to be kind of another Iron Man 2 thing? But I'm kind of hoping where, once we see Avengers: Age of Ultron, that'd be like, that'd set the bar high, where it's the total opposite of Iron Man 2, where Joss Whedon topped himself with the first Avengers. So we'll see where that goes. But like I said, it's not really a worry. It's just kind of an idea or a concern that's in my head right now. It is a possibility that maybe there's something like that can happen with Guardians 2. So we'll see. It might be a weird choice to pick Guardians 2 as one that I'm most concerned about, because at the same time, it's one of the ones I'm most excited about too. But just that idea of that kind of happening again with the Iron Man scenario. So we'll see.
Yeah. Cool. Kyle, let's go to you. So what's your what is your most anticipated, most excited on the slate?
I mean, I could pretty much agree with everything Tim just said about Captain America: Civil War. And I mean, it's exciting for me as someone who's more of just a movie fan, and a lot of this stuff is sort of some of my first introductions to some of these characters. When I see the hardcore comic book fans getting this excited about stuff, I'm like, ooh, well, I don't have all the back knowledge and stuff that they do, but that just kind of makes me want to get excited for it because I'm like, you know, if other people who know more about this than I do think it's going to be really good. And I mean, I know enough about it to know that I think it sounds exciting too. I'm not just like, oh, I have no idea what's going on, but those guys like it, so I should like it. It's like, I think it sounds exciting, but then to see other people get even more excited, it's like, okay, you know, I think I'm definitely excited to see what comes out of that, especially with Spider-Man. I mean, it's just going to be such a big deal to finally have Spider-Man come back to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, even as the you know, sort of a more casual fan, I guess, that I am. I've been hoping that would happen for a while now with, I mean, Sony just keep doing more and more reboots of Spider-Man, and then they're talking about, I don't know if they're still planning to do, like, their Sinister Six spin-off or whatever they were going to do, but I'm like, just give it back to Marvel. They're going to do an awesome job with that, so
yeah.
I'm pretty excited about that. But I don't know, I guess I kind of have a wild card pick here, too, because I could say this is one of the movies I'm most excited for, and maybe one of the ones I'm also the most worried about, which would be Thor Ragnarok. Just because I don't know, I really like the character of Thor in the movie so far, but I just feel like he hasn't had a really you know, a great movie yet. But I mean, I like his character. I mean, it's just from sort of an aesthetic standpoint, just, you know, sort of the little kid in me just loves the costume and his powers. And, you know, I'm like, if I could be any of them, I'd want to be the guy that can fly and shoot lightning bolts and just smack people with a hammer that nobody else can pick up. I'm like, I'd want to be that guy. And I've liked both of the Thor movies so far, but those seem to be, you know, kind of lower at the bottom of most people's lists in terms of, you know, if you were to rank all your favorite Marvel movies. And so I'm really hoping that they can, you know, finally have one that just sort of knocks it out of the park. And I've heard, I don't know if they officially said this or if it's just been kind of rumored or whatever, that movie is supposed to have, you know, some big event that, you know, that changes the future of the Marvel Universe from that point on.
Yeah.
And I even was just reading an interview with Chris Hemsworth today where he was kind of hinting at some stuff in Age of Ultron where Thor might start to kind of see a bigger picture of a bigger threat that's going to be going on here that might, you know, pay off later down the line. So it's looking like that could be a really big and a really pivotal one, and so I'm really excited for it. But at the same time, I'm kind of worried about you know, hoping that they can pull that one off and that it doesn't disappoint people's expectations. And then I guess the other one I would pick is just I'm not really all that excited about Ant-Man. But I don't know if they can impress me with that, then I mean I'm already sure that, you know, I know Marvel does good stuff with all their movies, and
Yeah.
I'm not thinking that one's going to suck, but it's just I don't really have an invested interest in that character, and I'm like, okay, so we've got Thor, Iron Man, Captain America, Hulk, all these big powerful guys, and then this dude can shrink to an ant. Okay, that's, you know, it doesn't sound all that appealing to me, but if the movie's good, and, you know, I'll probably go see it anyway, so if they can impress me with that, I'll be like, all right, I'm on board with whatever you guys got from that.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. While I do mine, I just want to let all of our listeners know that I will have an opportunity at the end here to voice some of your most least. So if you guys want to start tweeting at us with your most anticipated and the one that you're the most worried about, you can do that. ThunderQuack.net on Twitter. So for me, my most excited one is gonna be Captain Marvel. I am so glad. I mean, this kind of goes off of what you and I were talking about earlier, Kyle. That level playing field is starting to appear, and having Captain Marvel show up is going to be a really good thing for the universe, for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We do have some other characters coming in the Netflix series and that sort of things, but it's not quite as high profile. And what Captain Marvel can do because of the strength of that character and how interesting her story is. And it's going to all depend on where they grab her in the story, exactly what point they decide, whether it's going to be an origin story or not. I think it's exciting to get that leading lady presence into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. and there's just so much possibility. There's so much possibility for who they're going to cast as Carol Danvers. There's so much possibility as to who the supporting characters could possibly be. There's so many characters to choose from that are pivotal in that character's journey. So there's lots to get excited about there. And like I said, we don't know what point in the story they're going to grab. So it could be super recent stuff. It could be stuff way back. It could be the origin. They could skip the origin story and go straight to sort of like her rebirth as a superhero, or her recent sort of awesome resurgence as Captain Marvel, because she has been Miss Marvel in the past as well as the Sentry. So what I would really like to see, and I think we talked a little bit about this on the Pullbox podcast, but what I'd really like to see is a story with an established Captain Marvel that sort of gives us a really brief look at the origin story, and then we jump right into present day, and we introduce Miss Marvel as well, especially because we've got Inhumans coming down the road, and that there is a connection there between the new Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, and the Inhumans, and then have Kamala Khan actually be in the Inhumans movie as well. I think that there's a lot of really cool opportunities for that to happen, for stuff like that to go on. And then with that, we're not just getting one character, we're actually getting two awesome female characters who can sort of lead their own stories. So that's the one that I am absolutely looking at and going, this has the potential to be incredible. Just such a good movie that's going to knock it out of the park and open everything up. And just like I want to see with Episode 7, The Force Awakens, I want to see characters on screen that are representing everybody, in particular those characters for those who identify female, just to open that up, and give them characters that are role models that they see themselves as, not they are sort of in the background or part of the team like Black Widow. As great as Black Widow has been in every appearance that she's had, I mean, I think she's really one of the elements that makes Iron Man 2 underrated. Because she is so good in that, and people forget that that's where Black Widow first showed up, and that was the introduction of the character. They actually often cite it as one of the problems with the movie because it was Avengers 0.5 or something like that. It's like that was the beginning, the true beginning of our shared universe, and so you got to give it credit where credit's due. But that said, I like the character of Black Widow. I think that they've done a really good job. I think she's strong enough to have her own movie. I don't know why that's not happening. Maybe because she's already got so much exposure. She's been in 4 movies. That I think the only other character who's been in 4 movies is Iron Man. So, she's only been in 3 so far. She'll be in 4 movies. I was counting Avengers: Age of Ultron. So she's been in 3. The only person who beats her is Iron Man, who's technically in 5, but it's kind of a cameo in the Incredible Hulk. But I establishing more characters, I think, is a good direction. I wish it wasn't so far off, because I think that one's 2017. It's 2 years away. 2018. It's 3 years away. Like that, and I'm not looking at the updated slate, so I wonder if hers was one of the ones that got pulled. I hope it's not, or not pulled, but pushed. I hope it's not. And,
I believe it was, actually.
Yeah, I think it might have been.
Pretty much all of them after Guardians 2 got pushed back, except the two Avengers Infinity War movies.
Okay.
So
there
was one that didn't move.
That's unfortunate, because it means that seed change is that much further away for us. And as I talked about on a recent episode of Quiver, the Green Arrow podcast with Greg Miller, of Kind of Funny, we talked about Wonder Woman, and I had a lot of the same things to say about that. I really hope that Wonder Woman can be everything that it sort of live up to all of its potential, so that we can point to that as a great female-led superhero movie, so that we can get more stuff like that, not just in superheroes, but across the board. Because I think that when the genre leads the way, as it often does, it allows other stories to come out and sort of follow suit. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity for more action movies, genre films, genre properties, and just sort of more female-led stuff in general. I mean, we saw it when Buffy happened, and Joss Whedon is owed a great debt by all of us for making that happen, and for not giving up on the character when the movie didn't do well and bringing it to TV, because that character was really the beginning of that change. In sort of popular culture, and now whenever you think about strong female characters in a genre property, you think first of Buffy and Joss Whedon, and then you sort of you can branch out from there into all these other great characters who've come at the similar time or very soon after. So I want to see another sort of push for that, and I think Captain Marvel and Wonder Woman can team up and do that. The one that I'm the most worried about at this point today is going to be Doctor Strange. I have an odd relationship with Doctor Strange, so bear with me here. I have not read a whole lot of Doctor Strange comics, but I know the character fairly well, and I like the character. I like what he brings. I like his story, and in the same way that, like I was saying earlier, whether or not the plot points are all there, it's whether or not the characters are intact. And I have a very specific vision personally of Doctor Strange. And as I said, I've not read a lot of the comics. I've read some, and the ones that I've read, I really, really gravitate towards. And this is one of the things. Doctor Strange is a hard character to get right and to do incredibly well. I have complete and utter faith in Scott Derrickson, because there's an episode from a couple years ago of I think it's Smoothie Makers, one of Kevin Smith's podcasts, where he talked to Scott Derrickson about sort of his ideas and sort of the projects that he wanted to work on. And he has an idea for a movie based on Paradise Lost, the epic poem by John Milton, which chronicles the story of Lucifer's fall, and the battle in heaven, and the creation of hell, and the temptation of Eve in the Garden of Eden, and all that. And I love Paradise Lost. It's I can be a huge English literature geek for a minute. Just in terms of mythological storytelling, I think it is one of the first stories that you can point to that really started to refine what it meant to tell a story like that. And I mean, there are lots of religious connotations in that sort of thing, obviously, because it's very much so based in Christian, Judeo-Christian mythology, but which to some people is belief, myself included. So I look at that, and it really opens up that world to me. And when he talked about it in this great way of just sort of understanding the mythology of it mixed with the belief, and on top of that, the spectacle, and just telling a good story, telling a really cool story about an interesting but misunderstood character. And I think Doctor Strange fits the bill on that. It's a fantastical story, and and it's way out there, but there are at the same time that I trust Scott Derrickson, and I just noted a whole bunch of things that make me really excited about Doctor Strange. There are two things that make me very worried, and the first is I don't want it to be a horror movie, which is what Scott Derrickson is very well known for. And because it's more about the mystical and the strange than it is about the actual horror. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. He knows that. If you watch his Facebook feed, he posts stuff that's more in line with like the mystical cosmic side of things, which I'm really excited about, but still really worried because who knows what it's going to look like. I mean, people had weird things to say about Thor when it first came out in its cosmic aspects, and then Guardians of the Galaxy got some weird looks because it was colorful and bright and didn't quite match the other movies perfectly. And then Ant-Man is another one right now that people are like, ugh, I don't know about those weird scenes. And it's like, let the movie speak for itself, first of all. Like, we haven't even seen it yet. And if you think that's odd, dude shrinking down to the size of an ant, just wait until the Sorcerer Supreme steps into another dimension where the laws of physics don't apply. Because everything's out the window, and it's just going to be a 1970s album cover from start to finish. So that can go one of two ways. It can either be incredibly awesome, or it can be a huge mistake. And so that in and of itself just makes me so worried. Everything else that we've got on this slate is more of the same, or familiar formulas where X is swapped out for a different variable, right? Black Panther, I think, is a no-brainer. That story is an easy story to tell because it's such a solid story. So you just tell the story, like you just go, and the casting so far is awesome and everything. Captain Marvel, as I've said, like there's lots of good reasons to think that that's going to be great. Thor is just another Thor movie. Maybe it's going to be pivotal. Maybe it's going to have a really great story this time. I think it'll probably be another, just putting those characters through their paces and having fun with that, there's nothing wrong with that. Civil War, we have nothing to worry about. Absolutely nothing, because that just writes itself. It just writes itself, man. And especially you get Spidey in there, it doesn't matter what happens. If you go thwip thwip and he doesn't do his hair funny and dance emo, we're good. Like the bar is set so low on how bad a Spider-Man movie can be that it really doesn't matter. You just bring him in, thwip thwip, we're happy. It just has to have that moment of Captain America telling him that they have money and him giving him a hug. That's the most important to me. I don't know if that'll be in it, but probably not. But Guardians of the Galaxy 2, James Gunn's going to knock that out of the park. I am not even in the least worried about that. But here's the second part. Inhumans is a little bit weird, but Inhumans is basically an X-Men movie, right? And then more Avengers movies. So there's nothing to worry about. There's nothing to worry about with anything else, I don't think. But the second part of the Doctor Strange thing that gets me really worried is Benedict Cumberbatch. And I said his name properly.
There it is.
And I was tempted to not say it properly, but I'm going to be a nice guy. And I'm going to say Benedict Cumberbatch. On other podcasts, you might hear me say something else, but we're having a serious discussion about Marvel movies right now. So I'm going to say Benedict Cumberbatch as much as I want to say other things. Yes, he's a great actor. Yes, he's very talented. Yes, he was just recently nominated for an Academy Award. There's all sorts of reasons that you can tell me that Benedict Cumberbatch is great. Benedict Cumberbatch is a weirdie. He's a big, gangly, funny-faced weirdie, and there's nothing wrong with that because I think that we all know some gangly, funny-faced weirdies. This might be a feed with 3 weirdies in it. So I'm not criticizing him for existing. I'm just a little bit disappointed with that choice because Doctor Strange to me is very much the same character as Iron Man, as Tony Stark. They have very similar stories where they're on this sort of less than righteous path, and then they're hit with tragedy. For Iron Man, it is being injured and then having to build the Iron Man suit in order to keep himself alive, and the arc reactor and all that stuff. If we're talking about the movies, for Doctor Strange, for those that don't know the character's story, he's a world-class surgeon. He's a playboy, sort of cruising around in his fast cars and hanging out with very pretty ladies with his slick back hair and his charm and all that sort of thing, and sophistication, and it is that aspect of his character that's his downfall, same as Tony Stark. He gets in a car accident, he mangles his hands, and can no longer be that surgeon. He's no longer, like, everything that he lived for, everything that he defined himself by is taken away. Much in the same way that Tony Stark is forced to look at himself and then accept that everything that he's done his entire life has been for the wrong reasons, right? And sort of reassess and then come out the other end as a superhero. For Doctor Strange, his journey is longer than that, I think, and a little more spiritual. So where Tony Stark goes back to tech, he goes back to what he knows, and he builds himself into a better version of himself and becomes Iron Man. Doctor Strange transforms into another character, and that other character, I can understand people thinking that Benedict Cumberbatch is going to be great for, but the root of that character, being that sort of charming, suave, sophisticated, brain surgeon, I can see it happening. I can see it working. So there is still hope for me, but I just don't know if he's gonna be the same sort of character that I want him to be, that I envision him to be. And I will give Benedict Cumberbatch the benefit of the doubt. I hope that he can embody that character and do something a little bit different than what we're used to seeing him do. For myself, it's basically Khan and Sherlock. I haven't really seen much of the other things that he's done, and I'm sure that people can point me to some great stuff. And I'm going to try and check that stuff out so that I can have a better outlook on Doctor Strange moving forward. But I'm just worried that there's too much emphasis on the Strange and not enough emphasis on the Doctor, and that he's gonna this is the thing. Both Sherlock and Khan were played as these sort of aloof, detached super geniuses, and it could be very tempting to cast him because you want to do the same thing again. I don't want to see that. Like, I don't want him to play that sort of weird, detached character. Doctor Strange is anything but detached. I mean, he's definitely stoic, but the character has a really great heart to him, and a sense of wonder. And I think that's where that character lives and works the best, is when you take him from the suave, sophisticated, sort of charming, smarmy doctor, you break him down, he goes on an adventure and a quest to regain his lost ability, and instead discovers this incredible spiritual power and becomes the Sorcerer Supreme, Doctor Strange. And that journey is so much more than just doing some weird hand gestures and wearing a funny cape and some tacky jewelry. Like, it's a spiritual thing, and I don't want that spirituality to be approached with a detached sort of intellectual gaze. It has to be one of wonder and awe, like that's how it should work, and I hope that that's how it works. I hope that that's how they do it. But you know what? Like, this is the thing with Doctor Strange. He's a character that's been around for a really long time. There are multiple interpretations of him. There are different versions of the character from different writers. So there are different interpretations, just like there are with a lot of these characters. I mean, the current interpretation of Captain America, so different from the original interpretation of Captain America. It's much more in line with the Ultimates version, but at the same time, it's not the Ultimates version. Like, it's its own thing. So maybe it can live in that area. Maybe it can live in that realm where it's inspired by these different things. But I have a very specific idea in my mind, and so I'm worried about it. Very worried, because I've now talked for like 10 minutes about Doctor Strange. So
one thing I'm wondering about Doctor Strange, I mean, there's been a lot of, I guess you could say, complaints, whatever, that there's too many superhero origin stories. It sounds like his character is one that would need to be an origin story. Do you think they'll go the other route, where he'll really already be established as Doctor Strange, and maybe like a few flashbacks or something, we'll see like how he came to be with his accident and everything?
I think that, to me, especially just from what Mike was just describing, I think that's a story that, I don't know, at least from my sort of limited perspective, I think that almost needs to be told as an origin story, because that way, I mean, Mike, what you were talking about with the different, all the different dimensions and all this kind of stuff that people might, find weird or whatever. I mean, that was another one that kind of put me off at first. Like, oh wait, I'm hearing this guy can do like magic, and it's got different dimensions and realms and all this kind of stuff. Like, that might be kind of weird. But I mean, the difference for me between that and Ant-Man, in which both of them seem kind of risky to me, both seem kind of odd. It's like, if Doctor Strange works, I think that could be really cool, and if it doesn't work, it'll be like, well, that was weird and didn't quite work, but at least they tried something different. Whereas Ant-Man, I think if it doesn't work, it's just going to be boring. But I definitely think that as he is sort of, like you said, he's a normal guy, loses his hands or whatever, and has to completely change his outlook on life. And then, like, as he's discovering all these powers, we as the audience are kind of being slowly introduced to that world, rather than, you just have, Captain America or Iron Man walk around and be like, hey, by the way, this is Doctor Strange over here. He can do magic, and he's going to teleport you to a different dimension. And we're all like, wait, when did that all become possible in this universe?
Yeah, Doctor Strange, this is another reason to be worried, right? Doctor Strange is a character without limitation to a certain degree. And I think one of the problems in the Marvel Universe becomes very similar to the DC Universe, where you go, well, wouldn't Superman just handle that? In the Marvel Universe, there have been stories where at the end of the day, oh, we can't figure this out. You know who we should call is Doctor Strange, and to the point where that goes away from being like a oh, we'll just get Doctor Strange to do some magic and fix this, to Doctor Strange isn't currently here. He's on another plane of existence, so we can't get a hold of him. So we're gonna have to figure this out ourselves. Which like, those are they're equally crutchy storytelling. But at least the latter is a little bit more interesting, because it's like, well, we've gotten him out of the way. Now we're gonna tell a story. So in the larger Marvel Cinematic Universe, it does become problematic, because you are talking about bringing in a character who can do a lot of things that sort of finish the fight. But at the same time, I like Superman, the way that you explain that is Doctor Strange has bigger fish to fry than Thanos. He's dealing with multiple, not just multiple universes, but multiple planes of existence and multiple dimensions and all that sort of thing. So like, he has real problems, not that aliens are invading Earth, right? Like, that's a small time problem for him, because like, there's Dormammu's going to destroy the entirety of existence, and then there's nothing that anybody can do about anything. So Kurtis has chimed in on Facebook. He's messaged me, and said that I need to read some 1960s Doctor Strange, and that the 90s Doctor Strange is much more horror fantasy. So that's reassuring, because what Scott Derrickson posts on Facebook is often 1960s stuff.
Yeah.
And he I don't think that he's really posted much in the ways of the more modern 90s version of Doctor Strange. So I think that that's his approach. I think that that's where he's coming from with it. And I don't know. Time's going to tell on it. It's not that far out. It is what? It's next year, right?
Yeah, it's next November, I think.
We've got 2 movies before that one, so yeah, it's next November.
Yeah, because another thing I was thinking about as far as the whole origin for him, because he was name dropped in Captain America: The Winter Soldier by Sitwell, so you kind of have an idea that he was on Shield's radar, and you would think he wouldn't just be a normal surgeon if they were on his radar already. So unless they're going to kind of do like a prequel story that takes place maybe before certain events in the Marvel movies, or I don't know.
I think we will jump around in time a little bit. I mean that in like the narrative sense of the word, because or sense of the phrase, because Doctor Strange could very well jump around in time. But I think that we will possibly in a similar narrative structure to Iron Man 3. He may recount the story to us. I think what would be really cool is if his manservant, I always forget, I think it's Wu. I think his manservant's name is Wu. I don't know how they're going to tackle that character, because he's got he has basically an Asian manservant who follows him around and is sort of like his assistant. I don't know how they're going to deal with that, because they had to update the Mandarin pretty significantly to stay away from some troubling racial stereotypes that are baked into that character. So I don't know what they'll do, but maybe told from his perspective, so that he's sort of the one recounting the story to someone else. It would be really cool if it basically starts with the voiceover of well, let me tell you about Stephen Strange, and then you sort of go into the whole thing. He used to be a man like this, and he like fast car and fast women and all that sort of thing. And then tragedy, searching for a cure for his hands, and then we sort of slowly introduce whatever the bad guy is, whatever the conflict is, and then tell the story. And then the end of the movie is whoever's telling the story to someone at S.H.I.E.L.D., like telling the story to Agent Coulson or Nick Fury, and them going let me get this straight. This guy has magic powers, and then that's the end of the movie. It's just you just broke the whole thing wide open. Like the Marvel universe is completely changed. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot to be excited about, but there's a lot to be really worried about, because it could be awesome, and it could also just be so poorly done. So, but I have faith. So even when I say, and I think that we're all on the same page with that, even when we say that we're worried about these things, Marvel Studios has done such a good job so far. Kevin Feige's done a fantastic job. As long as he doesn't get hit by a bus, knock on wood. My bookshelf here is wood. Although I'm not a superstitious person, but as long as he's around to oversee it, and as long as Marvel Studios is bringing in intelligent, insightful, and interesting directors to helm these movies, I think we'll be okay. I think it'll be fine. So let's jump over to Twitter and see what people have to say. Mark Monahan says, looking forward to Black Panther, worried about Inhumans. So that's interesting. I can understand why people will be worried about Inhumans. That makes sense to me. Jacob Scott says, most worried about Ant-Man simply because of the change of directors, and I love Edgar Wright, who is supposed to direct. Let's unpack that one, because I have a controversial opinion on this. I'm going to get it out of the way real quick, and then one of you guys can talk and tell me that I'm an idiot. I think the best possible thing that could have happened for Ant-Man was removing Edgar Wright from that project. I've got my Oswald ears again. I gotta watch that. I drop a bomb and then make a joke. I think that removing him from that project was a really, really good move for the larger Marvel Cinematic Universe. I know that that's an unpopular opinion. It's not to say that I don't like Edgar Wright, because I love Edgar Wright. Shaun of the Dead is a fantastic movie. Hot Fuzz is incredibly good. And Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is one of my favorite movies of all time. That movie is so perfect. I put it up with Ghostbusters as a movie that you don't need to change a single element. Not a single frame in that movie needs to change. It is perfect just the way it is. Same as Ghostbusters and Raiders of the Lost Ark and a couple of other movies. That it's very rare that you can walk out of a movie and say that was exactly what it was supposed to be. Like that is a true vision from start to finish. It's not quite the comics, but it's a little bit better in some ways and a little bit different in other ways. And so I will say, like, I love Edgar Wright. I did not think that he was a good fit for the Marvel Cinematic Universe because he is an auteur. He's his own thing. Like, he has a vision, and that vision would have been compromised. It would have been changed, and it would have not been the movie that he wanted to make. And obviously that's what happened. That's why he was removed. That's why he stepped down, and Kevin Feige had to pull the trigger on that one. And I think that it takes a shrewd guy with a lot of good sense like Kevin Feige to look at that situation and go, this might be a fantastic movie, but it's really going to cause problems for everything else. And just, stylistically, I think it wouldn't have meshed. It would have been this weird departure, and it would have thrown a lot of people off. And then I think if that happens, everybody's waiting for the first movie to sort of fall, and then the whole house of cards that is the Marvel Cinematic Universe collapses, right? That's what a lot of people think, and there are some people out there that are hoping for it. Most of them probably work at Warner Brothers. But pulling him out of there and putting in another director that's more of a shooter, that's somebody who's going to go in and get the job done, that is a capable director, I think was a really smart move. And I think that in the long game, it's going to make a lot more sense. I don't know that this version of Ant-Man that we're going to get will be a better version than what Edgar Wright was going to bring us, and I'm reluctant to say that that's even possible. I think that Edgar Wright's version of Ant-Man would have been an incredible movie. I think it would have been great. And I would never argue against it, because I think that he's a brilliant director. I think he's a genius, and I think he's an auteur. And those are also the things that I think make him a bad fit for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think when you want to look at really great people to bring into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you do look at two types of people. You look at a guy like James Gunn, who's able to put his spin on it, but absolutely maintain what has been set by the rest of the Marvel movies, when it comes to visual style, aesthetic, and everything, fit within that world, and then elevate it in his own way, right? Or you go with somebody like the Russo brothers, who come in and they are excellent storytellers, but they're shooters, right? Like, they're going to come in and they're going to shoot that movie and they're going to get it done. They're very competent. They're good at what they do. Obviously, Winter Soldier is a fantastic movie. It has its problems, but like most movies do. But it is a very well shot, capable movie that's got some great characters and an interesting story that's fun to watch. So, like, you bring in those guys who can do that stuff, and I think that's great. You wouldn't bring in Wes Anderson to do a Marvel Cinematic movie. You wouldn't bring in Christopher Nolan to do one. You wouldn't bring in a lot of people, because they're going to come in and they're going to do their own thing, right? And that's not what you want in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You very much want rather than the lone wolf auteurs, you want team players and people that work well in a collaborative environment. So I think that the most successful properties so far have been those types. There's still a lot to worry about with Ant-Man, but I think it's better off the way that it is right now than it would have been in Edgar Wright's hands. Again, not because it would have been a bad movie, but because it would have been this weird deviation from the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it wouldn't have fit. It just would have been this kind of like how the Incredible Hulk doesn't really fit, right? It's just different enough that people tend to leave it aside and not think of it in terms of the rest of the movies. But what do you guys think about what I just said?
Well, I can like on the one hand, I can see where you're coming from, and I guess I don't necessarily have an opinion one way or the other as far as Edgar Wright specifically is concerned, because I mean I kind of agree with both of your points there that A, he would have made a good movie, but B, it could have been a little bit too different. I do think that, I mean, maybe I would have liked to see somebody try something a little bit different, you know, stylistically and visually and everything, especially with a movie like Ant-Man that's going to be something different from, you know, it seems like it's going to be a little bit further out there from some of the standard stuff we've seen anyways. And so it's like it could have been a risk that, you know, could have had big consequences had it failed. But if that had paid off, I think it could be, you know, pretty cool to see these movies maybe get a little bit more diverse in terms of visual style and that sort of thing, while still maintaining, you know, the same storyline continuity and everything that you can follow, and still be able to tell that it's all part of the same universe. But then on the other hand, I mean, one of the other things too that would make me, especially like if I was a big fan of Ant-Man and was really looking forward to this movie, one thing that would make me really, you know, worried about it, I guess, would be that not just that Edgar Wright specifically left, but the fact that, you know, suddenly the movie was changing hands and changing directors and stuff so soon before it was scheduled to like go into shooting and be released and everything. I mean, if I'm remembering correctly, I think when I don't think they found a new director for it until like less than a year before the movie was supposed to come out. And for me as a filmmaker, I'm like, that's cutting it kind of close there, guys. I mean, for me, a year is a long time to be able to make a movie, but I've never made a, you know, $200 million big budget feature length film. So I mean, for all that kind of stuff, and just knowing the way that Hollywood production schedules typically work, I'm like, this seems a little late in the game to be changing up directors. And you know, we've seen several other examples where you know, movies like that have you watch the movie and you can tell that that stuff just didn't quite add up the way it was supposed to, and you know, certain characters or story elements, you can kind of tell like one guy started building it up really well, and then another guy came in and took over, and this story just didn't have the payoff that it should have, or something like that. So that would be kind of what I would be more worried about as far as the director standpoint. I know, you know, you're probably in the minority of people who are glad that Edgar Wright left, but you know, I think you made a valid point there, so I'm not really arguing that one way or the other.
Yeah, for me, I'm actually kind of more in agreement with you, Mike, because when it comes to Edgar Wright, as far as I've only really seen, the only movie I've seen of his was Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, which I really liked. But I agree with you, where just from seeing that movie and knowing kind of his reputation was for like it would have its own unique style that would be very different. It probably was the right call. But what kind of makes me wonder about it a little bit was Ant-Man was planned like since the very beginning of Marvel Studios, like right when Iron Man, the first one, was being developed. And this kind of makes me wonder, was Edgar Wright being involved with it too? So this kind of makes me wonder if it's been in development that long, and as the Marvel Cinematic Universe was progressing, why all of a sudden did it happen like right before, like Kyle said, it was about to start shoot, that they said, you know what, this isn't going to work, we're going to have to get a new director, get someone to rewrite the script. You think if it wasn't going to fit with their whole plan for the cinematic universe, I think they kind of would have caught this early on, like maybe after the Avengers came out with their planning phase 2 or whatever, instead of being so close into production. I just find that a little curious. But I think the most people who were really upset about this were more diehard Edgar Wright fans than actual probably Marvel Studios fans. So I don't know. I think in the end, like you said, it's going to be probably for the best, and probably would have been a good movie because that test footage that he showed off I forget actually it was Comic-Con, but at some convention he showed it off and it came online. It looked really cool. So I'm hoping the final movie is similar to that, because some of the heists and the fight sequence he did in that test would have looked really cool. So, but in the end, like you, it's probably going to be, I think, the best for the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe, instead of having it stick out like a sore thumb if it was actually so different. So yeah, I'm in agreement with you.
Cool. Let's read off another one of these Facebook comments. Andy says, most anticipated Inhumans. He doesn't say why, but I'm going to guess because of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And most concerned, Spider-Man, because I don't know what the creative process will be like here. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we've talked a lot about Spider-Man tonight, and we're all really excited about it, but I mean, at this point, we don't know anything about it. Of all of these, we actually kind of know the least. Maybe except Inhumans. Except for maybe the connection to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know that anybody else is counting Inhumans as their most anticipated, because that one we just don't know that much about. And those are characters that not a lot of people know.
Yeah, which is probably why they're slowly trying to introduce the concept in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I would think, and it being so far off too in 2019.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but I mean, like you said, Tim, with them being so far off, I mean, just sort of all the movies on the back half of that slate. It's just, once we're more built up to that point, I'll get more excited for those. I mean, I was tempted to pick, Avengers: Infinity War as my most anticipated, just because it's going to be such a big event, and we'll finally get to see the showdown with Thanos and all that. But at the same time, it's like, just like I'm excited for Star Wars Episode 8 and 9, but like we have no idea what that's going to be about. I'm excited to see Episode 7 first, so I'm kind of more excited for the more foreseeable future, just because we kind of know a little bit more about what we're building up to there. But then, I mean, like you said, with Spider-Man, we don't really know. But one thing I'm excited about with that is just because we've had so many Spider-Man movies in, the last 10, 15 years, whatever, I think everybody pretty much knows his origin story at this point. And because they're starting him in in Civil War, and then so they're not starting off with a solo Spider-Man movie. I'm hoping that means we're not gonna get another origin story, and they're just gonna jump in. It might be a slightly different version of Peter Parker or whatever, but at this point, even casual movie fans and comic book fans and stuff know how Peter Parker became Spider-Man. So I'm excited to just jump into some new Spider-Man adventures, hopefully with some characters and villains and stuff that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, we actually really dumb if they do an origin story again.
Yeah, it would be stupid to do another origin story. We got some comments actually on the YouTube broadcast. I didn't realize that people were commenting like crazy over there, but they let me see who said it first. Rick Stokely said he would love to see the Scorpion as the villain. I absolutely agree with that. I think that the Scorpion would be a great villain. He's a classic ham and egger. He's just out there trying to do his thing. Like Matt Gargan he's just a bad guy. There's no world domination plot or anything to get in the way of that story. Just he's a bad guy and Spider-Man's got to stop him, but Spider-Man has rules to live by. I mean, I've said for a long time, basically since I saw The Amazing Spider-Man for the first time, that they broke that movie in the third act. The second that the lizard starts talking and has a plan, right? Like he's got a plan for world domination and turning the entirety of New York into lizard people, just like him. It's like, okay, first of all, why? You didn't really explain why he wanted to turn everybody into lizards. I guess he just thinks that that's better because he's a lizard dude, or maybe he just went crazy. But the cool story with the lizard, the reason why he's a great Spider-Man villain, is because he's not a villain at all. He's a science experiment gone wrong, just like Peter, and he's Peter's friend, and so it's this great dynamic of him needing to obviously live up to the words of his uncle, and live up to that responsibility. But at the same time, he's responsible to his friends as well. So like he can't just save the city. He's also got to save Kirk Connors. And I don't think that that's really what happened in The Amazing Spider-Man. I mean, yes, Kirk Connors doesn't die. He lives another day and all that sort of thing. But it's much more interesting to me if he's out of control and not the one responsible, so that it is this Jekyll and Hyde situation where Peter just has to like hunt him, basically, just like track him down, stop him, and then cure him so that the lizard isn't a problem anymore. And that's much more character driven than a fight on a great big tower, like I don't know, antenna at the end of a movie, which is that's apparently how you're supposed to end movies these days.
Yeah, pretty much.
I think that a suspenseful fight and sort of like cat and mouse chase that reverses itself and turns around and that sort of thing in the sewers would have been a way more interesting way to tell that story. And like I said, it's the third act. Everything up until the third act of The Amazing Spider-Man is a great movie, and then in the third act it just breaks down into this stupid. It may as well be the Super Mario Brothers sequel. Like, it basically looks like a Goomba, and he wants to turn everybody else into Goombas. That's what Koopa wanted to, or that's what Koopa had done in the Super Mario Brothers movie, right? Like, it's just. Spider-Man lives and dies with the story that you tell with his villains, and I think one of the reasons why Spider-Man 2 sort of maintains as I think the best out of the 5 is because that story with Doc Ock was the most interesting, and it was the easiest one to get invested in. You really cared what happened to Doc Ock in that. You wanted him to fix everything. You wanted everything to come out okay, and Spider-Man wanted to fix it. He didn't just want to stop the bad guy. I mean, I guess if anything, with the Sam Raimi movies, they did get that right in both Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3, because he's also trying to help Sandman, right? And really, Venom just kind of ruins that movie, but and just kind of sends that one for a loop. But back to the point of Matt Gargan being the bad guy in a standalone Spider-Man movie, the great thing about Mac is that the guy has very simple motivations. You bring in J. Jonah Jameson, he basically bankrolls creating the anti-Spider-Man, and turns out that the anti-Spider-Man's not a good thing, right? And you end up with the Scorpion and a big problem, and so that to me is the coolest way to tell that story, because it's cut and dry, and then we can just focus on characters. The plot doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be world shattering. It needs to be a personal story between characters. Hopefully they can do that. They did it with Iron Man 3, so we know that Marvel Studios isn't afraid of it. Now, obviously, there were larger implications there in Iron Man 3, but at the end of the day, that's a story about character. So let's hope that they can do the same sort of thing with Spider-Man when they get to that standalone Spider-Man movie. But it is 8:45 at the moment, so let's wrap this up. Do you guys have any final thoughts? Tim, any final thoughts on the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
I mean, we had to say stuff we're most worried about, but in the end, like you mentioned earlier, it's hard not to be excited about everything coming up in this slate. I mean, just the fact that, especially later on in Phase 3, the new stuff we're going to get, sure, we're excited about Civil War and then Guardians 2 and then the Avengers, but just the new characters that are going to establish. I just get so excited when this universe grows and grows, and I don't know about you guys, I just find it cool when, like, for instance, I'm watching Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and I think, you know what, at some point, somewhere out there, Peter Quill is flying a spaceship somewhere in the galaxy, and Rocket Raccoon and Groot are together. Just knowing that this universe is that big, and then we could be able to think about with other movies like with Captain Marvel or Black Panther and the Inhumans, just this whole universe growing and growing. I think it's really cool. And then when we get to Avengers Infinity War Part 2, just to have this big epic payoff, I think, to what this all started with in Iron Man. So yeah, just a lot to be excited for, and I just can't wait for May 1st to get here for this year with Avengers Age of Ultron to kick off pretty much this new era of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So it's exciting, and I can't wait.
Cool. What about you, Kyle? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I actually had just a couple quick responses to things you talked about earlier, just to kind of wrap them up. With the Benedict Cumberbatch thing, I think just like you kind of tried to soothe Tim's fears about Guardians of the Galaxy 2, you said James Gunn's just going to knock it out of the park. I think Benedict Cumberbatch is just going to knock that role out of the park. Even though he plays a bit of a weirdo sometimes, I think also in Sherlock he has moments where he can be kind of charming or whatever, but he's like doing that to use people and kind of manipulate them because he's that aloof, genius or whatever. But I think if you put that in Doctor Strange and just sort of tone that down a little bit, it's like, give that some genuine motivation rather than just he thinks he's better than everybody, smarter than them, trying to use them. Like, just make that some genuine human interaction. I think he'll do fine with that. And then, of course, the mystical, magical stuff, I think he's going to nail. And then just talking about the character diversity and stuff, one other thing I wanted to mention, because you had talked about the idea of, not using Miles Morales for Spider-Man, but you think they're definitely going to use Peter Parker, but then maybe changing the ethnicity of him to add more racial diversity and stuff like that. I'm not sure I like that idea a whole lot, just because, as much as I love, the idea of more diverse, racial characters, female characters, whatever. I don't always like the idea of changing it just sort of for the sake of diversity. I like it when it fits the story. I like it when it's a natural progression. And I love how in the Marvel Cinematic Universe now we've got Iron Patriot, we've got Falcon. I love both of those guys. Hope we see more of them. And then we got Black Panther coming. And so I don't want to have a Black Spider-Man alongside that just because we don't have any black characters, so let's make Peter Parker black, or Asian or Hispanic or whatever they would do.
Yeah.
I'd like to see them just sort of naturally introduce more of those characters who can fill their own roles, have their own place in the story, and it doesn't feel like, they just forced a change on Peter Parker because there wasn't enough of whatever else out there. But yeah, like Tim said, I'm excited for all these movies. I'm excited to see where they go with them, and Age of Ultron should be awesome, and we'll just continue on from there.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining us. Thanks, Tim and Kyle, for being on our first ThunderQuack Roundtable. I thank you, Kurtis, for planning to be here. We still do appreciate that, and for being in the chat and hanging out and still talking to us. And thank you to everybody who's currently viewing on YouTube, and thank you in the future to everybody who watches this in the archive. We appreciate all you guys. We especially appreciate our Patreon supporters who made this video possible by heading to patreon.com/ThunderQuack and supporting us there. There's awesome stuff. There are great perks that you can get. If you don't know what Patreon is basically like Kickstarter, only it doesn't end when we hit our successful funding goal or whatever. Patreon just keeps going. So you pledge a certain amount a month, and that helps us bring great content like this to you. Some of the perks, at the $5 level, you get access to the exclusive elite Patreon club, the ThunderQuack Patreon club over on Facebook, where we have lots of really cool discussions about all sorts of stuff, just like we did tonight. And that is at the $5 level. At the $10 level, you can subscribe. You get early access to either Quiver or Frontlines. Frontlines, the Rebels podcast. We don't do Frontlines anymore. You can listen to old episodes, but there won't be any new ones. The Rebels podcast or Quiver, the Green Arrow podcast. And at the $20 level, you can get access to both. And if you keep going up the line there, you can get some cool perks like getting to select the reader poll for an episode of the Pull Box podcast, and that's a really cool perk, I think. Let's see, what else is there? If you support us at the $50 level for 3 months in a row, you can actually get a special episode of your favorite podcast in the ThunderQuack Podcast Network, featuring yourself and the hosts of that podcast. So that's something really cool. That so far we got one of those coming up pretty soon. Maybe in another month and a bit to look forward to. So there's lots of really cool stuff to take advantage of over there at patreon.com/ThunderQuack. And of course, you can catch all of the awesome podcasts that we do over at ThunderQuack.com. There's links over to everything. That's where you can sort of stay up to date on the news about our new podcasts and new stuff that we're doing, as well as find the archived news posts about these, the ThunderQuack roundtables. So you can also subscribe to this YouTube channel and find all of our past, present, and future videos. And we're talking, this is the first one, but eventually there will be many, and we don't know if you're watching this and this is your first one to watch. There's hopefully by now way more. We've been going forever, and there are hundreds. So thank you guys for doing that, for supporting us on all those things. You can also follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/ThunderQuack, and on Twitter at ThunderQuackNet. ThunderQuackNet, right? Yeah, that's right. That's what I said at the beginning. We determined that. Okay, ThunderQuackNet. You can also follow me on Twitter. I'm at Arkwolf, ARKWULF. And you guys give yours?
You can follow me at TimG311.
Yeah, and you can follow me at Slim Avery, or you can follow our Star Wars podcast, the Star Wars The Saga Continues, at Star Wars TSC.
Cool, awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining me this evening, and I'm sure you'll be back for other discussions in the future. And thanks to everybody who's been watching live and watching in the future. We appreciate all you guys, and we'll be back the last Friday of next month of March to talk whatever we decide to talk about then. Who knows? It could be anything. So thank you guys for listening and watching. We'll catch you later.
Hail Hydra.